kind of shifted into different areas. And so I want to sort of set the tone of this video by just beginning there and getting it out of the way. After going through all of this, my main concern with this game going into it is probably going to be whether or not the mishmash of all the different stuff they are doing actually feels cohesive in game. And two, a lot of focus is being put specifically on the combat and movement systems, and this is supposed to be a big open world, and I'm curious how much depth to that world will actually exist. And those are things I'll simply have to wait to actually play the game and get into. Otherwise, though, let's go ahead and get into this. As I mentioned, this is an open world action adventure. That's important because what is reinforced by everything I've seen here is that this isn't like a super sweaty RPG with tons of numbers and mechanics. Most of it, including like gear and skill progression, all looks relatively straightforward like you would expect from an action adventure, even if you can do a lot of crazy stuff with it in combat. To that end, this game was originally announced back in like 2019, I believe, so it's been in production for quite some time, and it is using their own proprietary engine, which they have specifically referenced as being one of the reasons they can actually do some of this stuff. But otherwise, this game is going to see you primarily playing as a character named Cliff, who is a member of a faction known as the Greymanes. Now, strangely, it would seem that the main story doesn't quite follow Cliff for the most part. However, via progression through that story, you're going to get access to other characters you can play as. I don't have their names, but one looks to be a woman, and the other one seems to be like a different race entirely, and you'll be able to freely explore as those two characters, and that is important because they have like different weapons and setups than Cliff does. So with that in mind, there is no proper character creation here, and you'll be playing one of those three, it would seem, most of the time. But I mentioned you are a member of the Greymane faction. This is what actually kicks off the story. Your faction is attacked by a separate faction known as the Black Bears via an ambush. This ambush basically scatters your faction to the winds, several of them being pretty much dead. You in particular get hurt and cast off into a river like a few others, though you ultimately live, and much of the story revolves around that revenge story. But that's not where it ends, that's simply where it begins, because in pushing back and trying to get said revenge, you eventually uncover a larger plot revolving around the artifacts from the Abyss Realm. The Abyss Realm is something you'll discover as a different realm if you would believe it, but these artifacts that come from there grant people all of these crazy powers, and I will say the transitional, like loading screens I guess, between each individual area does give the impression of something really high-tech going on with the Abyss Realm, but these artifacts are going to empower and provide you with different abilities, which is one of the key progression points. But the Abyss is going to be interacting with real world known as Hyrule. Hyrule looks to be quite large, separated into 5 different regions with all sorts of towns and biomes therein. One of them is quite literally named Crimson Desert, which I suppose is where we get the title from, and it must be said the place looks gorgeous. I am not so sure about what it is going to have in terms of, like, again, depth and how much systems will be running in the background to make it feel like a sandbox or static and that kind of thing. But we do have a small answer to some of those questions because there's going to be resource gathering, various activities you can do, like observing people mid-activity to learn things from them, like apparently that's how you learn fish, as an example. There also looks to be a day-night cycle, but I would say, in a lot of ways, what excites me the most about everything they've shown off thus far is actually the movement and traversal elements, because it looks like they've done a lot there. So moving your way through the story, you'll get access to a glider known as Crow Wings, which allow you to spot this sort of crow-shaped hood thing that will, of course, allow you to glide, but that's hardly the only way to get around. You'll have various mounts. There's a big mech you can get inside of that can shoot missiles, which is one of the reasons I said, again, it kind of seems like a mishmash of different art styles and styles in general. So there is that. Other mounts include like a black bear, regular old horses, a dragon at one point even. But that's, how to like physically get around. But even within combat terms, it looks to be a lot of movement-related abilities. Like we see one instance of them like doing pole vaulting in one of the trailers. There's also all sorts of abilities that move you around the battlefield a great deal. But speaking of the battlefield, this is another part of the game that feels especially interesting to me because you're going to be getting involved in a lot of those small and large-scale battles. Small-scale stuff can be just you against a couple other people, and maybe a mini-boss or a proper boss fight against someone big. Now those fights, the boss fights in particular, do seem to have certain elements of it that are like a little more scripted than the regular bits of combat, and you can see this with the occasional quick time event. But it does look to be that most of the time you'll be in full control of all of these things, and that's important because another aspect of this seems to be destructible environments. We see a lot of footage of them just destroying all sorts of stuff, large towers, walls, that kind of thing. I'm curious what the exact limit of a system like that would be, and while they also show you maneuvering your way around those elements, it's also made very clear that you can like fully climb up and down things as another method of potential traversal if you need to go up rather than across. A few other things of note that I was able to glean from all of this, however, is that the main story itself is, at least from what they've explained, seemingly relatively linear, but you're going to be free to take on all sorts of side quests, which they've described as both small or more grand endeavors. From one of their more recent showcases, they show off, like, for instance, being able to liberate certain areas from other factions, such as various bandits. This looks to be like just a simple bandit clearing mechanic where after you do that, the original faction owners of the place come back, but they also mention more involved stuff like property seekers or simply getting involved in the usual local drama. But again, exactly how far that goes without playing it for ourselves is hard to say, but all of it will go progression in some way, if nothing else, towards just a pool of resources. But another aspect of progression are the Abyss artifacts. These are another thing you'll be able to find out in the open world, and finding them gives you access to your progression, being able to do things like upgrade your base stats, health, stamina, that kind of thing, or acquire new skills which come in all shapes and sizes from various grapple mechanics, or things more suited to a particular playstyle, like for instance one of your various weapon types, etc. That brings us to an interesting point, however, though, the equipment side of that. Now, I mentioned this game doesn't seem to, from everything I've seen, to have like big, heavy stats you have to figure out and get to the bottom of in order to be effective here. Most of it actually seems relatively simple. Items themselves seem to have base stats and things like attack speed, general defense stats, or like a crit chance as an example. And the better the equipment gets, the better those stats are, and then you can also take them to a place like a blacksmith and have them upgraded as well. And there also seems to be some method of enchanting that allows you to add extra effects to these items on top of even that. So there are things, of course, like various types of weaponry that you'll equip, different types of armor, that sort of stuff. And it does look like there's a baseline level of quality there, but it can be upgraded and changed a bit. And most of your stats seem to derive from that specifically, with
You'll need a top-notch team to win this one.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it finally happened. We finally got the news of the next Baldur's Gate installment, Baldur's Gate 4-ish. It's coming in the way that none of us expected. It's a TV show, which, when you think about it, really, Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, this kind of makes a lot of sense considering they weren't going to grab another developer and be able to top what Larian achieved with Baldur's Gate 3. This route is an interesting one because, you know, Baldur's Gate 3 being an RPG with like 17,000 endings, I would just love to know how they're going to make this work and make the gaming community that love that experience not complain about every single aspect like people just complain about the Amazon Fallout TV show. Very curious to see how they manage all of that. But yes, Baldur's Gate 3, one of the greatest games of all time. Like, look at this, open critic scores, 97% critics recommended the experience on Steam. You got very positive, 96%. Like, it is one of the greatest games of all time for a reason. Just so much love, so much content, so much quality. Everything about this experience stands out. And we even had debates on this channel about this game setting a new standard. People arguing it's an old standard. Regardless, though, this was a huge moment for the gaming industry. We're seeing many developers, like the CD Projekt Red team, they're working on The Witcher 4. They even acknowledged, like, this game meant something, and we have to look at it for inspiration. So it has had its impact on the video game industry, but it does seem like Hasbro has been really trying to figure out how do we milk this further. You know, Larian brought the Baldur's Gate franchise back alive, but we want to make more money from this. And look, Baldur's Gate 3 just a massive success, sold over 20 million copies to date. That was as of just about a month or two ago. So big success. And the thing is, though, people don't understand, Larian, they had to really earn their way to even work on this franchise. And it does sound like the deal that they cut out with Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast to work on the franchise, they weren't making as much money as they probably should have. And when this, you know, ended up being a massive success, it seems like Hasbro benefited a lot more than, well, than what we know of. And it's just rather interesting that also right around the time that Baldur's Gate 3 was this massive success, there was also stories like this being published by Polygon. Almost nobody left of D&D that helped get Baldur's Gate 3 off the ground, says Larian CEO Sven Vink. Wizards of the Coast provided both story and system support. And that's why it's very interesting, because when Sven Vink has talked about the video game industry, he's really gone after the greed. And this is a great example of this. Like, I'm sure he wasn't necessarily targeting this specific instance, but this is one instance in which it directly happened. You know, Baldur's Gate 3, massive success. You saw those scores, you saw the sales, and Hasbro still slashed tons and tons of jobs. And yes, it definitely has an effect on the Larian team if they want to work on this franchise further. And they didn't. And it's because everybody at Wizards of the Coast, there's nobody there that they previously partnered with. And I think it's great evidence that to them, like, hey, Hasbro is this corporate behemoth, they don't have a respect for what we achieved here. It's really best that we concentrate on what we're known for, which is Divinity, our own property. And look, they were put in a new limelight. They were at the top of the video game industry. No matter what they did, it didn't make sense to work on somebody else's franchise, especially when terms were more favorable to Hasbro. So it makes sense that they concentrated on Divinity, and obviously just about a month or two ago, we had that massive reveal and tons of reactions and excitement, at least with the announcement of, you know, a new Divinity game. They're going to take all those lessons from Baldur's Gate 3 and bring it to their own franchise, maybe make it the next big thing in the video game industry. Maybe Divinity breaks out in a way that nobody ever expected. But yes, this is something that Sven Vink, he has really gone after the greed of this video game industry. We've talked extensively about this on the channel. Baldur's Gate 3 director criticized publishers' greed and layoffs. Greed has been effing this whole thing up for so long. The timing of this is very interesting. March 2024, this was just about 3 or 4 months after this big thing happened, which Hasbro laid off tons and tons of developers. Because the timing is rather notable. And I do know that Sven Vink has debunked some of this stuff, saying like, no, the reasons why we're not working with Wizards of the Coast isn't because of this stuff. But it definitely seems like it has played a factor. And the fact is, they understand that this is a corporate behemoth and they cannot trust them. And also the fact that the individuals that helped them at Wizards of the Coast make Baldur's Gate 3 where it was, they're no longer there. But yes, Larian, they are working on Divinity, and they have said it's their biggest game ever that will be even larger than Baldur's Gate 3, which is, that is a bold statement to make. And Larian, this is what they announced in 2024. Again, this was just months after those layoffs. Larian Studios won't make Baldur's Gate 3 DLC expansions or Baldur's Gate 4. The developer is moving away from D&D. And yes, Sven Vink, the CEO, said the panel Larian plans to move away from Dungeons & Dragons entirely and do something new, which we know as Divinity, leaving the IP and publisher Wizards of the Coast's hands. And it previously was mentioned by Larian Studios senior product manager that they had discussions on doing more for Baldur's Gate 3, although at the time they were just focused on patches then. And obviously they came to the conclusion that they wanted to move on. Now, with that said though, we obviously knew that Baldur's Gate 3 was never going to stay dead. I mean, this is a franchise that now 20 million copies, they were going to move, they were going to do something. This is something that Hasbro said right around the same time Sven Vink announced that they were moving on. Hasbro wants to make another Baldur's Gate sequel, but it's early days yet. We certainly hope that it's not another 25 years. And these were specific remarks that came from an interview with PC Gamer by Eugene Evans, Senior Vice President of Digital Strategy and Licensing for Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, about where the series goes from here. And this is what he said in a statement to them. We're now talking to lots of partners and being approached by a lot of partners who are embracing the challenge of what does the future of Baldur's Gate franchise look like, says Evans. So we certainly hope that's not another 25 years as it was from Baldur's Gate 2 to 3 before we get to that. We're going to take our time and find the right partner, the right approach, and the right product that will represent the future of Baldur's Gate, and take that very seriously As we do with all of our decisions around the portfolio, we don't rush into decisions as to who to partner with on products or who products we should be considering. And it goes on to mention that I think it's too early to express specifics, and I think that there's a much bigger question about how we approach Baldur's Gate in the future, says Evans. But I would like to think about all of those characters, Baldur's Gate 3 characters for the sake of fans, could potentially appear in future products. And then, yeah, he says they are essentially part of D&D canon now. And now it is the question of how are they going to treat these characters in a fucking TV show? Because that was the big announcement from Deadline. Craig Mazin, the co-creator of arguably the most acclaimed... The Last of Us TV show, I have problems with it. The first season was fine. Season 2 was an absolute disaster in so many different regards. Like, The Last of Us video game was already controversial in of itself, but the changes that were made within that TV series honestly ruins, like, a lot of the themes and stuff that, like, you can have your issues with Druckmann and the direction that they took with The Last of Us Part 2. Some of it made sense. A lot of it made sense, but the way that they did the TV show, it just totally undercuts.
She has no fascist ideologies. What is the definition of fascism?
Something about, like, where you're putting other people down for your own gain.
No.
Let's talk about your gender. Could be introducing suggestions that they...
I think she's a great journalist, a great correspondent.
Does she
very
smile?
fair.
I've made my share of mistakes.
She smiles when she talks, but she doesn't smile when she's talking. She doesn't smile when. Well, hang on. Let me, Cameron, I'll come to you. Cameron.
cracked and choke. You guys have TDS, and everything Trump does is evil and awful and this and that, but the truth is that this is a hegemon. It is the global hegemon, and if we want to leverage our nation in order to acquire more land in our strategic interests, we're going to do that, and the EU is not going to do anything about it.
Watch Andrew Wilson go absolutely nuclear on this guy right here on the Piers Morgan Uncensored show.
In this situation, in my opinion, is Trump just happily playing Risk because he likes throwing power and tough talk around, but ultimately it's something that is going to be very damaging to the United States, to our reputation, which has already taken some hits in the past year. And being a global power is not just about what type of force and threats of violence you can throw around. It's not about the type of money you can throw around. It's about partnerships and building trust with other leaders. And in the past year, Donald Trump has given places like the EU a lot of reason to believe that we are not a stable partner. And that's why I think a lot of those countries are going to be turning to China, and it is going to backfire for generations.
They're not turning to China.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
Lydia.
ridiculous.
I don't think they're going to
Look at what they're doing financially.
No, not if you look at what they're doing financially. No, the United States is still the hegemon. It's going to stay the hegemon. The EU's not going to do anything about it. There's mayors of cities here. I believe in the United States have more than 60,000 people. You guys have TDS, and everything Trump does is evil and awful and this and that. But the truth is that this is a hegemon. It is the global hegemon, and if we want to leverage our nation in order to acquire more land in our strategic interests, we're going to do that, and the EU is not going to do anything about it. And that's the truth.
Per usual, Andrew Wilson with the truth nuke, but listen, Piers Morgan wasn't super satisfied with what Donald Trump had to say about Hillary Clinton, and Andrew Wilson has a fire response that he does have to see.
Clinton set deposition dates to testify before the House Oversight Committee. Any reaction to that?
I think it's I always liked him. Her, she's a very capable woman. She's better in debating than some of the other people. She's smarter.
I've never heard Donald Trump talk about Hillary Clinton. What's going on?
Well, I mean, what do you want? If he's making fun of her, you're upset. If he's not making fun of her, they're upset. What do you want?
Well, I'm not upset. I'm not upset by any of it. I'm just saying, he's gone from lock her up, facing an inquiry that might actually lead to potentially locking her up.
Yeah, I don't think that that's what's going on at all. I think that the Clintons want to clear their name. right? They've been mentioned. You have this kind of weight around Bill's neck. It's been well known that Clinton himself is a philanderer, right? But that doesn't mean that he's a chum. And this is one of the reasons I think they're rushing in there. Same thing with Elon Musk. It's going to be the same thing. He was mentioned in the Epstein files. I think he's going to want to clear his name as well. What we don't have right now is evidences of wrongdoing, and that's what we got to find. There's evidence of wrongdoing before we have guys come on panels like this and start talking about how everyone's a child molester. It's like, look, I want to see some evidence of that. Does that mean that we should release the rest of the files? I think we should release the rest of the files. I don't think anybody's opposed to that. That's something I would push for.
Donald Trump and the Justice Department are pretty opposed to that, it seems.
Donald Trump. Donald Trump. Bro just screamed in here with his Asperger's and was so anxious to say that. Wow.
I mean, Trump has kind of switched around.
It's not just Trump's Justice Department. If Joe Biden could release these as well, if Trump was really in them, and if the Biden administration had any knowledge that Trump was diddling kids, it would have been the most irresponsible thing on planet Earth to not have released that. So why didn't they? Well, they didn't because there's no evidence that he did.
No, they didn't release them because I'm happy to tell you why. Joe Biden had absolutely no desire to challenge the global elite at all. I'm sure plenty of Joe Biden's donors and friends are completely incriminated in the Epstein files. And ultimately, whether or not there was evidence of Donald Trump committing any sort of illegal actions in the Epstein files, Joe Biden was not going to disappoint the American elite, the many powers that are in these files, and also the Mossad, which is one of the main characters of the files. So no, I don't think Joe Biden
or MI6 or MI6 or any of the other intelligence groups which are working within the Epstein framework. But that's not really the point. The point that I'm after here is if Democrats said or thought in any way, shape, or form that Trump actually was diddling kids, underage kids, they would by any means necessary release that to have stopped Trump. They didn't because there is no evidence of that happening. That's why.
Well, the Democrats are trying to release it right now. It's the Republicans, except for Thomas Massie, that are trying to stop it.
Apparently, Donald Trump had another run-in with Caitlin Collins, one of his arch nemesis, and he was like smiling more, and I guess that's sexist or something. Check this out.
Now that nothing came out about me, other than there was a conspiracy literally by Epstein and other people. But I think it's time now for
the moon haunts you.
What would you say to the survivors who feel
the worst reporter? No wonder CNN has no ratings because of people like you. You know, she's a young woman. I don't think I've ever seen you smile. I've known you for 10 years. I don't think I've ever seen a smile.
No, I'm asking you about survivors.
You know why? You know why you're not smiling? Because you know you're not telling the truth. And you're a very good
Never fall!
No, Andrew, full disclosure, I'm no fake. I do the 9 o'clock slot. She does that. I think she's a great journalist, a great correspondent.
Does she smile?
She smiles all the time, but she doesn't smile when she's got. She doesn't.
You could just say
She doesn't smile when. Hang on. Cameron, I'll come to you.
Oh no! Cracked the show.
Here's my point. Andrew, here's my point.
Dude really just got so offended over does she smile.
Donald Trump has taken in the last sort of year or so being pretty offensive to female correspondents in particular. Should he do that, or should he be a little bit more respectful?
Trump's whole stylistic is being very combative with media. It's one of the things that really worked with him as a strategy in dealing with them. It's one of the most endearing parts of Trump when it comes to the American public's perception of him is the fact that he's extremely combative with the media. And let's not pretend that it's not a big game on both sides. Both sides are playing it. They both enjoy it. It's like a game of cat and mouse, right? Can I get Trump's goat? Oh, I did. Go off on me. It's big news, right? right? It's part of the combative nature that he has with the media. It's probably one of the guy's most endearing qualities, honestly. Everybody is always freaking out about it. But that's the thing that the kids call porn, right? The whole idea that he can have these engagements with these media personalities and it goes viral and people are laughing and they're having a good time. I mean, it's part of this guy's personality. Always has been.
I mean, Lydia, I don't think for a moment that we'll leave it to she's a tough cookie. I think she'll probably be quite enjoying the attention on it. It just makes her a little bit more famous and probably more people tuning in. But as a woman yourself, if you were disparaged in that way by the president, do you think that's the right way to talk to female correspondents, female journalists, if you're the president?
If I was in Trump, I would not encourage him to do that. Yeah, you don't want to get people's appearances, tell a woman to smile. That's just not what you should be focused on.
Look at Andrew's face. Bullshit.
But I guess I understand the point of a lot of folks in the MAGA base want to see him sort of own the libs and own the media. But I think there's a way of doing that in a way that isn't offensive to
You don't think that that's hilarious? Like, it's objectively hilarious when he has these exchanges with media. And media kind of, I've seen them go out of their way to kind of make the exchanges happen even, because they know it's going to be all over the news. It's news itself when he has these exchanges with these various women. And I mean, are you really pretending that it's not hilarious? It is hilarious, right?
I don't think it's objective. I think it's subjectively hilarious. And obviously, you feel that way. There's a lot of people who feel that way. I would not.
I mean, you're smiling right now. But, all right.
Yeah, but I do think it's important. Okay, I'll come to Joe, but I do think it's
I don't know. It might have to come to he might have to be the one who gets cooked in this video, to be honest.
As Caitlin pointed out, got a bit drowned out, but she was asking you a question about the Epstein survivor, and it's not something you normally crack a smile about as you did it. I don't dispute that Trump's style is popular with people, and sometimes he makes me laugh. I do find it a little bit ugly, I have to be honest, Joe, the way he's gone after some of these female correspondents. And knowing Caitlin, I think she's one of the fairer ones anyway. I never see bias with her. It's like when Jimmy Costa used to, literally game those Oval Office pressers and try and make a name for himself.
Yeah, there are a lot of people out there who want to be the story. She's not one of them.
Well, we saw it with Don. We actually saw it with Don Lemon as a classic example, which I was going to come to, because Don Lemon actually almost happened by going so hardball after Don Lemon, Joe, is it's turned him into a martyr, and it's revived his whole career. He's now on Jimmy Kimmel. He's now doing all these big interviews. He's getting big numbers for his YouTube show and so on. I mean, the only winner out of all that is Don Lemon.
Completely, Pierce. Absolutely, completely. He's taken Don Lemon to another level in the stratosphere because he went after him on a case that I think will be dropped. Before you get to Lemon, and I know people want to talk about Lemon, again, this point needs to be made. I agree with Andrew. I'm sure I know there are a lot of people who love that Trump does this. And I know there are a lot of people who find it funny, but it is also ugly because he has a particular long-standing habit of attacking the physical appearances of female reporters. There ain't nothing funny about that. Miss Piggy, hey, Miss Piggy from a couple months ago, he said to a female reporter, shut up, Miss Piggy. Come on, that's not funny.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is.
No, he wouldn't find it funny.
Yeah, it's fucking hilarious, dude. Quiet Piggy was phenomenal.
But this child has always been more comfortable in the dark. The battle starts in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All you need to do is capture the mission area. Got it?
What are they like, these other worlds where I do not exist?
If you're close enough to hear me say this, I can.
Coming in fast.
An unpleasant message to be sure.
I just found one.
They got me good. I can use a hand. Maybe a foot.
Looks like the mission area is yours to capture now.
I purge the darkness. The moon haunts you!
Hold on to it.
By the shades of the Seraphim, I return.
Look out for Moon Knight's onks.
Render me assistance. Good medicine. Destroy the Punisher's turret. Give it never fall! Behold the God of Thunder! Mortal pain is no match for the Sorcerer Supreme.
Survive this.
The moon haunts you!
I don't fear pain. I fear failure.
Friendo! Your god is suffering! Begone, culling turret! By the eye of Agamotto! Out, dark magic!
And just like that, I believe in
Control
it.
seized. You've captured more than half of the mission area. Keep going.
A successful operation.
Button already.
Good medicine.
Just coming in fast.
Judge, jury, executioner!
Down goes their accuracy percentage.
Look out for Moon Knight. Glory is almost yours.
The moon against the world.
Give it never fall.
Of Moon Knight.
You'll have to keep fighting until we have a winner. So much for Moon Knight's onk. They've almost got it.
I have unfinished business here. I still need you. I'm opening a portal.
Levitating.
Pentagram of Parala.
I am Phoenix.
Good medicine.
You'll have to keep fighting until we have a winner.
Behold the God of Thunder!
You lost his hand.
Render me assistance. As Sorcerer Supreme, I oversee other magical adepts.
Huddle up, team.
30 seconds before you attack. Get ready.
Yeah, so do I. And it kinda sucks. Think you could help me in the cycle for good?
The battle starts in 5, 4, you need to do is capture the mission area. Got it?
What is a hero? An overgrown child with a weapon.
The moon haunts you!
Looks like the mission area is yours to capture now. The mission area is yours.
By the eye of Agamotto! Enemy in front of us.
Help! I've heard pretty bad over here. You captured more than half of the mission area. Keep going.
Your god is suffering.
I purge the darkness. The moon haunts you.
Rainbow stands with you. The area is almost yours. Disappear. I am Phoenix.
I'm opening a portal.
They got me good. I can use a hand, and maybe a foot.
Another epic victory. Big win. You'll need a top-notch team to win this one.
You don't have to be a witch to find the magic in this world, but it does help.
Steven, what happens when destiny debates philosophy? Let's find out.
I don't like the arguments that are rooted in history or in scientific fact to establish these truths, because people are doing that because they don't want to have the more difficult sociological or the social argument.
At this point, Peter Boghossian unleashes his secret weapon upon destiny.
Swap out David and Brett.
I may be powered
Brett
by
Hall.
chaos,
Okay.
but I'm trying to bring a bit
I
of
like this guy.
order to the universe.
He's sharp.
Okay.
30
Brett, I
seconds
can fight
before
with.
you attack.
What does biological
Get
truth
ready.
mean to you?
I don't understand why biological truth continues to bother Destiny
Something has
so much.
changed
With
in
biological
you,
knowledge, I can tell you
You're
about
not the
what
innocent child I once knew.
the differences between sexually reproducing organisms happen to be, and the existence of these
I'll just
problematic
take your
cases,
word
these
on
edge
that one.
cases, do not refute the existence of the binary male and female.
That's a really important point that's going to come up later. Just because there's an exception to a rule does not disprove the rule.
I guess just from an ontological sense, saying like biological truth, I feel like gives way more philosophical weight to a scientist than they ever should have.
There is such a thing as objective truth. It exists. Whether or not we can fully understand it is another question.
Right, to be able to define, like, what is nature? Like, do trees exist separate from leaves, separate from the ground? Does, you know, can any collection of matter be defined extinct? This is very boring, like, epicenter metaphysics. But yeah, that's the only thing I would be, like, I would be uncomfortable saying that, like, this is biological truth. You know, I mean, insofar as this is biology, I guess. You know.
So would I. I would just say this is our best explanation of how it is that, you know, organisms happen to reproduce from male and female.
There's a hierarchy of explanations. There has to be one explanation that's better than the other explanation. One explanation is going to be more in line with objective truth than the others.
And the mind is an asexual thing. In principle, in the distant future, this mind that runs on our brain could be downloaded onto a computer somewhere. And the computer would have no gender. In fact, AGI would have no gender. So therefore, mind has no gender. They do not have a sex. You're infinitely elastic to use your gender expression because of the way in which our mind works. Granted, the brains may very well be able to distinguish male or female like an MRI, but we are not brains, we're minds.
I feel like you get into really weird, I guess it depends on how you're viewing the mind-brain distinction there, because then my next question, I would just go organ to organ.
I guess this is what happens when Destiny gets philosophical. No wonder he doesn't want to do this.
Maybe I could very easily ask, is a penis a male or female thing? And maybe we could gender that as male, but if I were to say, is there such thing as a female or a male arm, or a heart, or any other part of the body?
A skeleton. An archaeologist digs up a skeleton. They have the ability to use science to identify if that skeleton is male or female. They dig up the skeleton arm. That arm is male or female.
In the same way, or a similar way that you identify a brain as being either male or female by looking at the MRI, you could say, the heart actually belongs to a male because if you drill down into the cells, you see that it's like chromosome B, and you have a male or Y chromosome.
I would say, I guess, like, the reason why I'm still on this and why I don't enjoy this conversation is because I feel like there isn't very much pursuit of any type of ontological truth about the category of male or female. I think that this conversation is 100% held hostage by people that want to go on and make social arguments about it.
That's a crazy claim within itself. Making observations about objective truth is 100% of the time held hostage by people that just want to win arguments.
So who should be allowed to participate in sports, who should be allowed to whatever, and because those arguments are best if you can source them from some scientific foundation, people are like, oh, well, I want to argue with the science now about this.
And I think Peter Boghossian kind of calls him out here in a very subtle way. If he poses it as a question.
So I was going to ask, isn't the way that people answer that question more ideological than scientific?
Yeah, but people try to, people do the same thing with history. If you look at Ukraine, Russia, if you look at Palestine, people like to argue, well, historically, this happened, and then it gives some justification for the current action.
He's literally arguing against the study of the past because of how people wield knowledge.
But if you go to Russia and Ukraine, they'll give you history, you go to Palestine, history, you can talk about trans people, they'll give you two different scientific definitions.
But that doesn't change the reality of what is scientifically true.
Because people would rather, if you can source their things scientifically, you're not going to argue the personal part.
I'm not sure how you're going to be able to find solutions to these social issues without acknowledging objective truth, though.
But the reality is, like, we could imagine a world where 1% of women have spikes that come out of their wrists. We wouldn't let these women participate in any combat sport because they'd be killing people. It doesn't matter if they're women or not, we just wouldn't. They'd have an unfair advantage. Much the same, we could acknowledge that, we could say, okay, well, trans women are real, but because of the bodies they've been born into and the advantages granted thereof, we probably just wouldn't let them compete in sports with non-trans people. The same way that if you're a fifth grader who's been held back 15 years, you're not going to be on the same sports team as my son playing soccer. That's just not going to happen, right?
Wow, and we shouldn't connect